It was my birthday, and the morning arrived quietly, like any other. The early light crept in through the curtains of my modest living room, casting pale streaks across the carpet. Outside, the world carried on as usual. Neighbors leaving for work, children tugging at their school bags, the faint rattle of a bicycle passing by. For me, though, the day felt heavier, not because of any celebration, but because birthdays at my age tend to remind one of time itself. Another year gone, another year closer to silence. I made tea the way I always do, carefully measuring the leaves, letting them steep while the kettle cooled just slightly, and then pouring into my old ceramic cup. The steam fogged my glasses for a brief moment, and I chuckled to myself at the routine. These little habits had become my companions more than people had. The house was calm, too calm, almost as though it were holding its breath with me. I did not expect visitors, nor did I plan for a gathering. My son had his own life, his wife his obligations. In truth, I had not celebrated my birthday with family for many years. By late morning, I sat in my armchair with a book resting open but unread on my lap. The words blurred as my thoughts drifted to the years behind me. A sudden knock at the door startled me. It was not loud, but in the stillness of the house, it sounded almost urgent. I set aside the book and walked slowly, my joints stiff from the morning chill. When I opened the door, I found a small package sitting neatly on the step. No one stood there. The street was empty. Only the faint sound of a car turning the corner. I bent down, lifted the package, and carried it inside. The box was not large, but it had weight, enough to make me curious. Brown paper wrapped it, with a label showing my name written in careful handwriting. For a moment, I thought perhaps a neighbor had sent something, or an old friend. But then I saw the return address. It was from my son. I paused, my hands resting against the paper. It had been a long time since he had sent me anything directly. Birthdays usually passed with a short call, or, in recent years, sometimes just a text message. Holding this package, I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. A gift from him for me. A strange mixture of joy and hesitation swept through me. What could it be? Why now? I placed the package on the table by the window, letting the light fall across it. The clock ticked softly on the wall, marking each second as I stared at the box. I did not rush to open it. Instead, I let it sit there while I finished my tea, trying to calm the growing storm of curiosity within me. The house was still quiet, but now it was a different kind of silence, the kind that carries expectation. Something waited for me inside that paper, and though I could not yet see it, I already knew it would stir emotions I had not felt in years. I have lived in this house for nearly 4 decades. Its walls have aged with me, gathering the quiet scars of time. The faded marks where my late wife once hung family photographs, the creak in the floorboard that my son used to leap over as a child, the faint scent of varnish from when I tried to mend the furniture myself. Life, in its simplest form, has always been made of such details. When my son was young, he filled this house with noise. His laughter used to bounce off these very walls, his footsteps pattering across the hallway as he ran to greet me when I returned home from work. I can still remember his small hand slipping into mine, his eyes full of trust, as though I were the only anchor he needed. Raising him was not easy. Money was always tight, and I often worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. But no matter how exhausted I was, when I looked at him, I felt a purpose greater than myself. His mother, my wife, was the softer one. She carried a patience that I lacked, a gentleness that steadied me when life threatened to overwhelm. Together, we tried to give our son everything we could, even if it wasn't much by the world's standards. Birthdays in those days were simple affairs, a cake baked at home, maybe a small toy if we could afford it. But what mattered was the togetherness, the laughter, the way he would fall asleep with a smile on his face, clutching his new treasure in his arms. Time, however, has its own plans. Children grow, parents age, and life scatters people into different directions. My son became ambitious, as I had hoped he would. He studied hard, built a career, and eventually married a woman he loved. I was proud of him, yet I also felt the slow unraveling of the bond we once shared. The phone calls grew shorter, the visits rarer. At first, I told myself it was natural. He had his own responsibilities, his own family to care for. But as the years stretched on, the silence between us deepened into something heavier, something unspoken. I never blamed him outright. After all, isn't it every parent's wish that their child builds a life strong enough to stand without them? And yet, late at night, when the house was quiet and I lay awake, I sometimes wondered if he remembered those years when I carried him on my shoulders, when I stayed up all night by his sickbed, when I worked double shifts so he would never go hungry. Did he ever think of those sacrifices, or had they become invisible threads woven into the background of his life? Our interactions these days are polite, almost formal. He calls me Dad still, but the warmth I once felt in the word has thinned. His wife, though respectful, keeps her distance as if I am a guest in their lives rather than a part of it. I do not resent her, but I sometimes sense that my presence is more obligation than affection. It was in this atmosphere that the package arrived, and that was why it surprised me so deeply. A gift, not just words, not just a passing greeting, but something chosen, wrapped, and sent. I could not help but recall the little boy who once crafted birthday cards out of colored paper and crayons, handing them to me with such pride. Somewhere inside me, that memory stirred, whispering that perhaps the distance between us was not as final as I had begun to believe. Still, doubt lingered. I knew my son well enough to understand that every action carried a reason. Was this gift born of genuine thought, or was it prompted by someone else? His wife perhaps suggesting it? The heart can be fragile in its expectations, and mine, weathered by years of quiet, did not want to hope too quickly. As I sat staring at the package, memories of the past and the reality of the present merged in a single, uneasy question. What did this gift truly mean? The package sat before me on the table, bathed in the soft glow of afternoon light. I had looked at it long enough, circling it with my eyes as though it might reveal its secret without my needing to touch it. But gifts do not give themselves away so easily. Eventually, curiosity outweighs hesitation, and with a sigh, I slid my fingers under the fold of paper. The brown wrapping was stiff, the kind that crinkled with a dry sound when handled. I peeled it slowly, almost ceremoniously, unwilling to rush. The adhesive tape gave way with a faint tearing sound, and the first layer of paper fell loose, revealing a sturdier box beneath. A faint whiff of polished cardboard rose as though the gift itself had been sealed away too long. The box was heavier than I had imagined. Not the clumsy weight of something meaningless, but the deliberate density of an object made with care. I tilted it slightly in my hands, listening to the muted shift inside, and my heartbeat quickened. My son had chosen something valuable. That much I could tell. I opened the lid with cautious fingers. Inside, cushioned by soft fabric, lay a small, rectangular case. Black leather, smooth to the touch, its edges stitched neatly as though to declare its importance. My breath caught as I lifted it out, holding it gently, as one might cradle something fragile. A tiny clasp held the case shut. For a moment, I simply stared at it, delaying the final reveal. When I pressed the clasp, it released with a quiet click, and the lid opened. There, resting against the velvet lining, was a gold watch. The light caught its surface immediately, scattering warm reflections across the table. It was not garish, not overly extravagant, but undeniably fine. The dial gleamed with a subtle elegance, the hands slim and precise, the strap polished as though it had been waiting just for me. I could smell the faint metallic tang that new watches sometimes carry, mingled with the leathery scent of the strap. My fingers trembled slightly as I touched it. A watch, a symbol of time. How fitting, I thought, for a man who had spent so many years watching the hours pass, working, sacrificing, waiting for moments that never returned. For a fleeting second, a rush of warmth filled me. My son had not only remembered my birthday, but had chosen something meaningful, something lasting. A watch was not just an object. It was a companion, a reminder of each moment ticking away. Perhaps it was his way of saying he thought of me, of acknowledging the time we had lost and the time we still had left. And yet another feeling tugged at me, quieter but insistent. Why this gift? Why now, after so many years of silence and distance? My son was not careless, and he was not sentimental in the way his mother had been. His gestures often carried layers beneath them. I lifted the watch from its case, feeling its cold weight against my skin, and a shiver of unease passed through me. The second hand ticked softly, steady, and unyielding, and in that rhythm I felt something I could not yet name. Pride and gratitude mingled with suspicion. My son's gift was beautiful, yes, but gifts are never just objects. They are messages. I only wondered what message he meant for me to read in this one. I held the watch in my palm for several minutes before daring to slip it onto my wrist. Its weight was steady, not overwhelming, but enough to make its presence known. As I fastened the clasp, the leather strap gave a faint creak, molding itself against the shape of my skin. It fit almost too perfectly, as though my son had taken great care in choosing the size. The cool touch of the metal against my veins sent a ripple of awareness through me. The dial shone in the afternoon light, and when I lifted my wrist, I saw the second hand sweep in precise, elegant movements. Each tick was like a whisper in the silence of the room. The sound was soft, yet constant, a reminder of time's steady march. I raised my arm closer to my ear and listened. Tick, tick, tick. It was strangely comforting and at the same time unsettling. I caught my reflection in the window pane. An old man stared back at me, his face lined with years, the gold on his wrist almost too fine for such weathered skin. For a fleeting instant, I felt proud. My son had chosen well. He had thought of me, remembered me, invested in something of value. The gleam of the watch felt like a bridge, a fragile connection across the distance that had grown between us. And yet, as I traced the rim of the dial with my thumb, a knot tightened in my chest. Why this? My son knew I did not live a life of luxury. He knew my days were simple, quiet, shaped by routine rather than grandeur. A gold watch was beautiful, yes, but impractical for someone like me. It was the kind of gift one displayed at gatherings, at dinners, at meetings where appearances mattered. My life held none of those occasions. I leaned back in my chair, letting the ticking fill the silence. With each passing second, my mind drifted to old memories. I remember the nights when I used to come home late, clothes smelling of oil and sweat, and my son waiting for me by the doorway. He would hand me the little paper watches he had drawn, complete with numbers and wobbly hands. "So you don't miss bedtime, Dad," he would say with a grin. Now, years later, he had given me a real one, but the meaning felt tangled. Was it nostalgia, or was it something else entirely? I ran my fingers along the strap again, noticing how new it felt, how untouched. There was no warmth in it yet, no history. I wondered if I would ever wear it long enough for the leather to soften, to carry the faint imprint of my wrist. Or would it remain just an ornament, something I looked at but never truly claimed as my own? Still, I could not deny the flicker of joy it brought me. A father, no matter his age, longs for recognition from his child. And in this watch, gleaming quietly on my wrist, I felt at least a trace of that recognition. At the same time, however, unease lingered. I could not shake the feeling that the gift carried more weight than gold alone. The watch ticked on, steady and unrelenting, as if urging me to face a truth I had not yet uncovered. The longer I wore the watch, the heavier it felt. Not on my wrist, but somewhere deeper, as though its ticking seeped into my chest. Each second carried not only the sound of time, but the echo of memories I had tried, in my quiet way, to keep folded away. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the rhythm guide me into the past. I remember my son as a boy, his hair always a little untidy, his eyes burning with curiosity. He was the kind of child who asked questions about everything: the stars, the noise of the train at night, why I worked so late. I would tell him stories, simple ones, to satisfy his restless mind. He never let go of my hand in those days, and when I carried him on my shoulders, I felt taller than any man alive. The watch ticked, and another memory surfaced. I remember the day he graduated, standing in the crowd, clapping until my palms burned. He wore his first suit, and I saw in him not the boy I raised, but the man he was becoming. I cried silently that day, not out of sadness, but out of pride so sharp it almost hurt. I thought then that the bond between us would remain unshakable. But life does not honor such hopes. Somewhere along the way, silence replaced laughter. My son became busy, his voice over the phone brisk, efficient. He always said, "I'll come by soon," but soon stretched into months, then years. The boy who once clung to me, now, seemed to live in a world where I no longer fit. The watch gleamed on my wrist, a bright contrast to my roughened skin. I wondered, was it meant to bridge the gap, or to remind me of it? I thought of his wife, polite but reserved. I tried to welcome her, but I often felt like a visitor in their home. She spoke kindly enough, yet there was always a distance, as if she drew a curtain between their world and mine. Perhaps it was not intentional, perhaps it was just her way, but it deepened the quiet that had already taken root between my son and me. The ticking grew louder in the silence of the house, and with it, another memory arrived, this one harder to bear. I remember the night my wife passed. My son was there, standing awkwardly by my side, his face pale with grief. We held each other, father and son, bound by loss. That night, I thought we had been pulled closer by the weight of sorrow. In the years that followed, he drifted farther away. Perhaps her absence left a space neither of us knew how to fill. I opened my eyes and looked again at the watch. Gold, polished, precise, everything I was not. Was this gift a symbol of care? Or was it an obligation, a gesture made because appearances demanded it? My heart wavered between gratitude and suspicion. I wanted to believe it was love. I wanted to believe my son still saw me not as a duty, but as his father. But doubt crept in, stubborn and cold. And still I could not bring myself to take the watch off. For even in my questioning, it carried a warmth I could not deny. The mere fact that he had sent it, after so many years of forgetting, stirred a fragile hope within me. A hope that perhaps he remembered those paper watches, those nights at the doorway, those mornings when he climbed onto my shoulders to see the world from higher ground. But hope is a dangerous thing. It softens the heart, only to make its breaking sharper. I traced the rim of the watch once more, listening to its faithful ticking, and whispered to myself, what does this gift really mean, and why now? That night, long after the lamps were dimmed and the house sank into its usual silence, I sat by the table with the watch resting before me. It glimmered faintly under the yellow light, a patient thing, ticking away as though it had no concern for the questions it stirred inside me. I leaned closer, studying it as if the truth might be coaxed out of its surface. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the beauty of fine craftsmanship. The gold case shone with a luster too perfect to belong to a man of my modest means. The leather strap bore the faint scent of newness, untouched by sweat or wear. It was undeniably expensive. Too expensive. I traced the dial with my finger. The numbers were etched delicately, almost austere in their precision. The hands swept with grace, smooth and unbroken. But as I tilted the watch under the lamplight, I noticed something odd, a faint engraving along the rim. Not on the front where one might expect, but tucked against the side, nearly hidden. I squinted, bringing it closer. The letters were minute, almost invisible unless one looked deliberately. 3 initials. Not mine. Not my son's. Someone else's. A chill passed through me. Why would a new watch bear someone else's initials? Was it secondhand? Regifted? Or was there some meaning my son had not explained? I turned the watch over, my pulse quickening. On the back, another detail caught my eye. A date, carefully etched, but unfamiliar. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't my son's. It wasn't even my wedding anniversary. A day that meant nothing to me. Yet someone had marked it carefully enough to immortalize it in gold. The ticking grew louder, or perhaps my ears simply sharpened to it. Each second seemed to prod at me, urging me to uncover what I was meant to see. I slipped the strap open and examined the inside of the leather. There too, faintly pressed, were initials. Different again. My hand trembled slightly. What had I been given? For a moment, I forced myself to breathe. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps the jeweler had made an error. Perhaps my son had bought in haste, not noticing. But the more I thought of him, his careful, deliberate nature, the less that explanation seemed to fit. My son did not buy things carelessly. Every choice of his was measured, calculated. The unease that had been merely a shadow in my heart now sharpened into something more tangible. The watch was not merely a gift. It was a message, or worse, it was something that had belonged to another. And then another thought came, unwelcome but persistent. Could it have been intended for someone else? I sat frozen, staring at the gleaming thing that only hours ago had filled me with warmth. Now it seemed to watch me in return, its polished face reflecting my furrowed brow. The seconds ticked on, steady, relentless. I closed the case gently and placed the watch back onto the table, though I could not take my eyes off it. The gift that had felt like a bridge between father and son now stood like a riddle, daring me to solve it. And as I extinguished the lamp and laid down in the quiet of my room, the ticking followed me into the darkness, steady, patient, waiting. I knew then that I would not rest until I discovered the truth hidden within that golden shell. The next morning, I rose earlier than usual, though I had hardly slept. The watch still lay on the table where I had left it, glinting faintly in the pale dawn light. It looked so innocent, so harmless, and yet I felt the same unease as one does upon finding a locked drawer in a familiar house. Something meant to be hidden, something waiting to be uncovered. I picked it up again, holding it with both hands, careful, as if it might break or worse, reveal something I wasn't ready to know. The initials along the rim stared back at me. Crisp, precise, intentional. They weren't decorative flourishes, nor a jeweler's mark. They were ownership carved in metal. Ownership that was not mine. The date on the back troubled me most of all. I whispered it aloud, testing the numbers on my tongue. They meant nothing to me, yet they were important enough to engrave permanently. Why? I thought of anniversaries, of contracts signed, of deaths recorded. I tried to recall if the date held any link to my son's life, but none came. It was as if I was staring at a door without a key. As the morning stretched on, I found myself pacing the room. I even pulled an old notebook from the drawer, writing down the date, the initials, searching for patterns. A habit from younger days, when money was short and I tracked every coin with precision, had returned now, only instead of numbers, I was trying to balance meaning. I turned the strap inside out again. The second set of initials pressed faintly into the leather, like a whisper of another story. This was no random watch. It had passed through hands, carried secrets, and now, somehow, found its way to me. My son's face flashed in my mind. The way he had sounded on the phone, brisk, hurried, almost distracted, when he wished me a happy birthday. He hadn't lingered. He hadn't asked if I liked the gift. It was as if the package itself carried the conversation he didn't want to have. I set the watch down and rubbed my temples. The questions swirled, colliding. Did he buy this for me? Or did he inherit it? Was it even meant for me at all? And beneath those questions lurked a darker thought, one I tried to push away, but could not. What if this gift was not about remembrance, but about responsibility? What if in giving it to me, he was passing on something he no longer wanted to hold? I lifted the watch again, pressing it close to my ear. Tick, tick, tick. The sound no longer felt steady. It felt insistent, almost accusatory, as though every second was demanding an answer. The initials, the date, the hidden marks, they were not accidents. They were messages, perhaps not meant for me, but left for me to decipher all the same. I had lived long enough to know that nothing in life is without reason. My son, deliberate as he was, would never place something of such weight into my hands without purpose. And yet, until that purpose revealed itself, the watch remained both a treasure and a burden. I slipped it back onto my wrist, fastened the clasp. The leather was stiff still, but it held firm, as though claiming me. I stared at the gold gleam against my worn skin and whispered under my breath, "What are you trying to tell me, son?" The watch, faithful and unyielding, ticked on. I knew then the truth would not stay hidden forever. This gift, this puzzle, was only the beginning. By the third day, I could no longer endure the silence. The watch had become more than an ornament. It was a question strapped to my wrist, a riddle that ticked louder the longer I tried to ignore it. Every time I glanced at the gleaming face, Those tiny engravings seemed to mock me, as though whispering, "You know this is not yours." I decided I would call my son. My fingers hovered over the phone for several minutes before I pressed the number. It had been some time since I dialed without waiting for him to call first. The ringing felt longer than usual, my breath shallow, as though I were preparing for an argument I hadn't rehearsed. When he finally answered, his voice carried the same brisk tone as always, clipped and efficient. "Dad, how are you?" "I'm well enough," I said, though my voice betrayed a tremor. "I received your gift." A pause followed. I thought I heard the faint shuffle of papers on his end, or perhaps the tapping of keys. "Ah, yes. The watch. Did it arrive safely?" "It did," I replied. I looked at it then, gleaming in the light from the window. "It's fine craftsmanship. Too fine for me, I think." Another pause, longer this time. "I thought you'd appreciate something lasting." "Lasting," I repeated softly, letting the word linger. "Tell me, son, whose initials are these?" For a moment, there was nothing but silence. I imagined him frowning, perhaps sitting straighter in his chair. Finally, his voice came, quieter than before. "You noticed?" "How could I not?" I asked. "They are not mine. They are not yours. And this date on the back, it means nothing to me. So tell me, what exactly have you given me?" I heard him sigh, a weary sound, the kind that comes from carrying a weight too long. "It's complicated, Dad." "Then simplify it," I said firmly. My heart pounded, but my voice held steady. "You owe me that much." On the other end, I could almost hear his hesitation, as if he were choosing each word carefully. "The watch, it wasn't originally meant for you. It belonged to someone else, someone connected to my wife's family." The word struck me like a cold draft through a door left ajar. My grip tightened on the phone. "Her family? Then why send it to me?" "Because," he said slowly, "they wanted it gone. And I thought giving it to you would be safer." "It's not just a watch, Dad. It carries attachments. Expectations." I stared at the golden dial, suddenly seeing it not as a gift, but as a burden. "So this is no birthday present," I whispered. "This is a transfer." His silence confirmed more than his words. My chest felt heavy, but I pressed on. "Do you understand what you've done? You placed a mystery in my hands without telling me why. Do you think I'm so old that I will not see what is before my eyes? Or did you hope I would simply wear it without asking?" "I didn't want to worry you," he said, almost pleading now. "I thought it would feel like a gesture, a way of remembering you." I was wrong. I see that now. I swallowed hard, torn between anger and sorrow. The watch ticked steadily, as if mocking the broken rhythm of our conversation. "You are my son," I said quietly. "I raised you with what little I had. And now, when you finally give me something, it is not love, not remembrance, but a burden you wish to pass away." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't mean for it to hurt you." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. But it did. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, heavy with things neither father nor son knew how to mend. At last, I said, "Tell me everything. If you give me this watch, you give me its story too. I will not carry it blind." On the other end, I heard him exhale a long, resigned breath. "Very well, Dad. You deserve to know. The initials, the date, they belong to a man who once," he stopped, gathering himself, "who once held power over her family. That watch was his. And by giving it to you, they believed they were closing a chapter." The words settled over me like ash. The gift was not chosen out of love, but out of necessity, perhaps even desperation. I looked at the gleaming watch once more. Its beauty remained, but its meaning had shifted entirely. No longer a bridge, it was a weight. And yet, even as my son spoke, a strange calm filled me. At least now, the silence was broken. At least now, the truth had begun to surface. That night, I could not bring myself to sleep. My son's words, half spoken and half withheld, churned in my mind like restless waves against a shore. The watch wasn't meant for you. It belonged to someone else, someone connected to her family. It was not an answer, not fully. It was a door cracked open, showing only shadows beyond. And shadows, I had learned through a long life, rarely hide anything gentle. I sat in my chair, the watch resting in my palm. It seemed to hum faintly, as though it were alive, its secrets pulsing through the gears. I had asked for truth, and I would not let my son bury it beneath half-truths and silence. So, the next morning, I dressed with unusual care, slipped the watch into my pocket, and made the journey to his home. The walk felt heavier than it should have been, my legs carrying not just my body, but the weight of years of unspoken things between us. When I arrived, he seemed startled to see me. Perhaps he had hoped distance would keep questions at bay. His wife lingered in the background, her eyes flickering briefly toward the watch as though it were a flame she dared not touch. I wasted no time. "Son," I said, lowering myself into a chair, "you will tell me everything. Not some, not half. Everything." He looked at me, then at his wife, then back at me. His jaw tightened. "If I do, you may wish I hadn't." "I am old," I replied. "Regret is no stranger to me, but ignorance that I cannot carry." His wife's eyes softened, and she gave the faintest nod, urging him forward. He began slowly, his voice heavy with reluctance. The watch belonged to her grandfather, a man of influence, of wealth, but also of debts and dark dealings. To the world, he was respected. Within the family, he was feared. The words pricked at me like thorns. "The initials you saw," my son continued, "they are his. The date," he stopped, exhaling deeply. "The date marks the signing of a contract that bound her family in ways that still cast shadows over them today." His wife lowered her gaze, her hands twisting in her lap. I understood then. This was no simple heirloom. It was a relic of power, of control, of promises that had cost more than money. My son's voice wavered as he pressed on. When he passed, that watch became a symbol, not of love, not of memory, but of ownership. Whoever held it was tied to what he had built and what he had broken. The room felt colder with every word. I looked down at the object in my hand, golden and gleaming, and yet now it seemed stained. "Why give it to me?" I asked softly. "Because they wanted it gone," he admitted. Her family believed that by placing it outside their circle, they could finally breathe free of its shadow. And he swallowed hard. "I thought I could shift that burden, that by sending it to you, it would lose its hold." I sat in silence, the truth sinking deeper. He had not meant to harm me, but he had used me as a vessel, a vault for a legacy too heavy for him to keep. His wife finally spoke then, her voice trembling but sincere. "I'm sorry, Father. I said nothing because the story carries shame. That watch destroyed peace in our family for decades. It was not meant as a gift of honor, but as a chain. You should not have been the one to bear it." Her words cut with honesty, and yet they also carried relief. For years, she had lived under that shadow. Now, the shadow sat in my hand. I turned the watch once more, the light catching on its polished face. A gift or a curse? "I see now," I said at last, my voice quiet but steady. "This was never truly mine. It is not meant to mark birthdays or bond fathers and sons. It is a relic of debts unpaid, of wounds unhealed. To keep it is to carry a ghost." They said nothing, but their eyes revealed agreement. Slowly, I set the watch down on the table between us. For a moment, we all stared at it as though it were alive, breathing its history into the room. Then I pushed it gently toward them. "This belongs to your past, not my present. Do not make me the keeper of your ghosts. If you wish to be free, then bury it, burn it, or lock it away where no eyes may see. But do not hand it to me with the word gift." My son's shoulders slumped, a mix of shame and release flooding his face. His wife's eyes glistened, though she nodded firmly. For the first time in days, my chest felt lighter. As I rose to leave, I placed a hand on my son's shoulder. "Remember this. Gifts are not burdens passed in silence. They are acts of love. When next you think of me, do not send me chains disguised as gold. Send me your voice, your presence, your time. That is the only treasure I seek." He bowed his head, unable to speak, but I felt the weight of his understanding. I left their home that afternoon with empty hands, yet with a strange sense of fullness inside. The watch, that gilded riddle, no longer ticked against my wrist. Its story, once hidden, was now laid bare. And I knew, as I stepped into the fading light, that sometimes the greatest gift is not what is given, but what is finally put to rest. When I stepped back into my own home, the silence greeted me differently than before. For days, the ticking of that watch had haunted every room, every corner, every pause between my breaths. Now the silence was clean, pure. I sat by the same table where the watch had once rested, its absence like a missing tooth you cannot help but feel with your tongue. And yet, I did not mourn it. On the contrary, I felt as though a shadow had lifted. It struck me then how fragile the word gift can be. How often in life do we call something a gift, when in truth it is a burden, a favor wrapped in ribbon, a debt disguised as generosity, a chain passed from one hand to another with a smile that hides the strain. I thought of my son, of the shame in his eyes when I told him I would not carry his ghosts. He had not meant cruelty. He had meant escape. And yet, in choosing me as the vessel of his burden, he had forgotten what a father longs for most. Not riches, not symbols, not heirlooms, but love. Love in its simplest form. A voice on the phone. A visit without reason. A hand on the shoulder when the world feels heavy. We live in a world that often mistakes value for meaning. Gold, contracts, possessions, they glitter, they weigh, they endure. But they do not love us back. The watch had been gold, yes, but its ticking heart was not beating for me. It was beating for a past that should have been laid to rest long ago. As I reflected, I realized something else. Not every inheritance deserves to be carried forward. Some legacies are poisons. Some heirlooms are chains. To honor the past does not mean to keep its curses alive. Sometimes the bravest thing a family can do is let go. I thought of my wife, gone now these many years. She had always said, "Do not hold on to things that darken your spirit. Life is too short and too sacred for such weight." I smiled faintly, hearing her voice in my memory, and wondered if she would have laughed at the irony that it took a golden watch to remind me of her wisdom. To those who listen to this tale, I offer this. When you give, give with love, not with fear. When you receive, receive with gratitude, but also with discernment. Not every package wrapped in paper carries joy. Some carry shadows, and it is no sin to set them down. For in the end, the greatest treasures are not made of gold, nor etched with dates, nor engraved with initials. They're the moments we share, the words we speak, the presents we give to those we love. That is what I will remember from this strange chapter of my life. Not the watch, nor its mystery, nor the shame it carried, but the lesson it left me with. That sometimes the most valuable gift a father can receive is not something that glitters on his wrist, but the time, the voice, the embrace of the child he raised. And perhaps, in learning this, my son too will one day understand what it truly means to give.